Thank you for joining our webinar, 2020 ScholarOne Roadmap. Is Brian Russell, and I'm happy to introduce Josh Dahl, Product Director, ScholarOne, and Web of Science Author Connect. Josh?
Hello, thanks, Brian. And I'm going to turn my video on for just a moment. We'll keep it off during the presentation, just because I know everyone's bandwidth is precious these days. But I'm excited to be here presenting the ScholarOne Manuscripts 2020 Roadmap. And I'll be joined today by Chris Hyde and Sven Molter, who are both part of the product team here at Clarivate supporting ScholarOne.
Hello.
Perfect. So today we're going to cover, this is a presentation that we typically have in the first part of the year. We'd like to be able to share where we're headed, just a few highlights from where we've been, and talk about the future of the product, get a chance to share this with our customers. So we'll cover a few highlights from 2019. We'll go into our 2020 priorities and roadmap, and then we'll go through some of the recent and upcoming releases we have. And of course, as Brian said, we've got plenty of time for Q&A at the end of this, so we'll be able to take your questions in. Just to start, though, of course, one of the roles of product is to be able to anticipate where things are headed, and also to be able to react to rapidly changing environments. And there's nothing more rapid than the pandemic and COVID-19 and the impact that it's having on businesses and people worldwide. Who could have imagined 6 months ago that we'd be in this position today? But certainly there probably could have been some epidemiologists and such that could have predicted something like this. But again, most people, this is completely unprecedented where we are. And of course, on top of that, we've already got major disruptions and changes in business models for publishers that have been in the works for years and are getting acceleration. We've got, of course, the role of preprints, which is even more important and even more of a question now, with the need to get research out as quickly as possible, but also to make sure that it's valid science. We've got technological advances, both the good and the bad. The good being the ability to automate and make much more efficient things that are right now very manual. But of course, the bad is the risks around bias and other types of things that are hard to detect. And most importantly, the disruption that your children working from home can have when they spell check your presentation. It's not my child, but we understand that there are major changes, both ones that have been in the works as well as ones that are very immediate, need to be reacted to. So part of our roadmap is, there are things that we've shifted much more quickly to cover based on recent changes, as well as things that we've been working on for quite a while. So with that, we'll just go through a few highlights from 2019. This is not an exhaustive recap of everything we did last year. And in a lot of cases, I was actually pulling things and looking at things that actually have an impact, that are starting to head in the direction, that are having the outcome we were hoping for. Unusual activity detection is something we launched in 2018, so it wasn't a 2019 initiative. But we've got about 14% of our sites using it, so quite a few out of more than 7,500 journals. And we know with certainty, based on conversations and based on data that we've provided with the tool, that it's helped detect and provide evidence for everything from fake peer reviews, papers from paper mills, and now changes after revision. So adding authors to help kind of boost reputation without necessarily being part of the original research. And so these are things that we know, working with customers, that it has helped to identify and help to protect the integrity of the process. The ORCID login. Login is and continues to be a major challenge. Our goal with launching this, with turning this on across every site that had ORCID already enabled, was to simplify researchers' access to any journal on the platform. With over 440,000 logins in March, that's quite a few logins. A little over 4% of all the sessions in ScholarOne used ORCID to log in, which is pretty impressive. That means that at least 4% of all the users had or created an ORCID to get in. And this also includes people that access the system from a deep link. So that number is actually people who actually logged in. It's actually a much higher percentage, but overall, good progress there. More progress to be made to simplify the login experience across ScholarOne. We launched an initiative with our colleagues at Publons around transparent peer review. So far, we have 60 journals piloting. Over 2,000 articles were made public with transparent peer review. So those are open reviews published alongside the article and made openly available. One of the publishers that's part of the pilot reported 87% of the authors that were asked agreed to transparent peer review. So pretty impressive. I think it helps to show that there are changes that maybe some of our assumptions can sometimes be tested and found that there's more openness to change than we realize. And finally, this is a small feature, but one we thought is a quick win about simplifying the author experience by streamlining how you add a previous co-author. So showing you a list of recent co-authors and giving you an easy click button. 15% of all submissions use this feature in the first part of this year, which is quite a few. You figure we get last year 2.5 million new submissions came into ScholarOne. So that's quite a few submissions that actually use this. And on average, when they used it almost 3 times per submission. So even though it's a small change, it could be minutes, it could be a couple minutes having to pull all the author's information. Small changes build up and have a big impact. So now talk a little bit about 2020 priorities and roadmap. We've got 6 of them for 2020, and these are continuations in a lot of ways of priorities that we've had leading up to this point. So last year and even some cases the year before. One is just the extreme focus on the author and improving the author experience. We like to measure that and like to see how we can do that by reducing the time it takes to submit overall, and also can we help reduce the time it takes to get a first decision. So those are 2 metrics that we're looking at around improving the author experience. We have been focused on improving editorial efficiency, and so this can mean anything from reducing the time it takes to make a decision, but also having some impact on reducing the number of papers that are rejected after going to peer review, because we know the cost and time really adds up when you go into peer review, not to mention the impact on your reviewer pools and continued fatigue. Overall, we have a goal to improve peer review, and this is not only by increasing the relevant reviewer suggestions that we're making, so increasing the number of reviewers that can be added and ultimately are good fits for the paper, but also by helping expand reviewer pools overall. We've had a major focus starting last year on growing our partner and customer ecosystem. So we've had APIs for quite a while. We've had partners for a while as well, but we really formalized that with our partner program, as well as accelerating a lot of integrations with partners and customers. So our goal is to increase the number of overall integrations with the product. We have initiatives around improving customer delight. This is a major focus for Clarivate as a business, but for us, it means very specifically things that we can do to help improve the customer experience overall. We've worked on our business model and our commercial model, and that's something that we've been rolling out slowly and steadily, but also helping to speed up customer resolutions is something we're now focused on in the near term. And so this can be escalations within our teams. Finally, we always be looking at different opportunities in other markets, conferences and funders, where it makes sense for us to look at application of our tools there. So for our roadmap, as a product team within Clarivate, there are 4 kind of core areas that we look at across the board around usability, streamlining integrations, data sets and improving the data and data sets, as well as analytics on top of that. And then, of course, just making sure that the products are competitive. Talked about some of the recent improvements that we've made. Through Q1 of this year, we've had simplified third-party integrations. So this relates to our partner program that launched. We've had kind of additional rollout of those 16 partners and continued integration. For example, BioArchive, we're very close to being able to roll that out across the board, but we've really ramped up the number of journals using it in the last few months. We've worked on the open peer review workflows, working with Publons around transparent peer review. So that's been an important initiative and one that we're going to plan to expand quite a bit in the latter half of the year. We've rolled out new screening tools for editors using data-driven checks as well as integrations with partners. So this is now part of a new document analysis area in ScholarOne, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. And then, of course, our continued focus on improving the author experience with tools and with simplified ways to get into the system that make it really easy to submit. And upcoming, we've got continued improvements to our search algorithm. So for Reviewer Connect and for finding reviewers, we've got new capabilities around conflict prevention, as well as an improved search algorithm to help find the right reviewer the first time. We've got faster turnaround times for some of our things that are escalated within ScholarOne teams. So this will allow us to be much more rapid in responding to many different types of requests that you need to contact us about. We've got our expanded Reviewer Connect integrations, which we'll talk about a little bit later, but being able to provide that in more systems. And we've got just the rapid growth of new third-party submission integrations happening in ScholarOne. So this is not just customers who are building author portals, but this is also preprint servers and authoring environments. So quite a bit to come up, and this is not the full list, of course. This is just high level. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the specifics in the next few slides. And so with that, I am going to hand it over to Sven Molter and Chris Hyde to talk about recent and upcoming releases.
Thank you, Josh. So I'm getting the screen sharing going here. Chris has the first couple slides, and then I'll pick up right after that. So Chris, over to you.
Thanks, Sven. So in the Q1 2020 release earlier this year, we launched updates to our Unsilo technical checks, which I will discuss. Manuscript prefill work that Sven will discuss. Updates to rich text emails, so the ability to send emails with bold, highlight, rich text items, and then a number of top customer issues and defect resolutions that Sven will also discuss. Next slide. So servicing new data-driven insights for editors is one of the key things that Josh just mentioned, and he referred to our new document analysis page. What you'll see here is specifically document analysis page turned on with Unsilo's technical checks feature. Our partnership with Unsilo has added a number of features to ScholarOne. This technical checks is very specifically to help speed and increase the velocity of the administration and evaluation of manuscripts. So admins can come here and look at up to 30 checks. Unsilo has a number of different checks that are available. You do not need to purchase or use all of them. You can use just the ones that you want, and our UI will adapt to those. But in this example here, you'll see things like making sure that the article includes a funding statement, or if it doesn't, the fact that it doesn't, that would either pass or fail a check. In this coming release in May, we'll also be adding a functionality for evidence. So you'll see here on this screenshot that there's a link called evidence, which will bring up the modal that you see here relating to funding statement. And that basically gives you the text from the document that Unsilo has extracted, kind of providing the evidence of that check meeting or not meeting its standard. There are other options to make sure that there are keywords listed, providing an estimated or an actual word count, things around a conflict of interest. Again, up to 30 checks, which can be used in total or selected from Unsilo's list. The next item that appears at the top, which is great additional work and tool for an editor is the ability to see whether revisions include new authors. This was for making sure that it kind of goes hand in hand with our unusual activity tool, which I'll discuss in a second. But it gives admins and editors the ability to see if a new author has kind of strangely been added or unnecessarily added after the original submission has come through and been revised. That's a major concern for journals, and it was added in this past release. Next clip. Top journal matches. This is a tool that we added to, again, the document analysis section of ScholarOne. And in a lot of ways, it's kind of the cousin of Reviewer Locator. But instead of looking through the Web of Science to find reviewers that match a article scope, this looks through Web of Science to find journals that match the article's scope. Scope fit is a major issue and something that journals really want to make sure matches the first time to ensure that the article does not need to be transferred multiple times, and that's something that we've added here in that document analysis section. And then finally, a lot of you may have known about the unusual activity detector or detection tool we call UAD. But this is a tool that allows or checks for inconsistencies in the peer review process that may alert the journal to potential fraud by peer reviewers. As I mentioned, the tool above relating to whether an author has been added during revision is part of that. This is a great tool that you can use as part of this document analysis to just ensure that all of the checks you need to do up front are working. Just to kind of encapsulate this at a high level, all of these tools are around making sure that you're getting to that first decision on a manuscript as quickly as possible. Josh mentioned 2.5 million manuscripts last year. That breaks down to roughly 1/3 never going to peer review, being rejected out of hand. 1/3 going to peer review and ultimately being rejected, and only 1/3 ultimately being accepted at the journal. So what you want to do is get to the right decision. Do I immediately reject, or do I send a peer review right away as quickly as possible to not waste any of the valuable time? Sven?
Awesome. Thank you very much. Yeah, so that's pretty exciting. And, a few other things that we're going to talk about with trying to kind of speed things up, like speed to decision time, is also the speed to submit. And Josh talked a little bit about the add previous co-authors button and how that is allowing submitters to select accounts right there without having to search, without having to enter information. And we're just trying to build up time savings throughout the submission process. And so that's, what this first item that we're going to talk about, that is submission prefill. That's just another piece of trying to, kind of speed up the amount of time that people spend in the system, getting through that submission as quickly as possible so they can go back to the research or they can go back to submitting to that next journal. And so with this last release in the first quarter, we took the beta label off of submission prefill, which is just kind of like a fancy way of saying if you take your Word document with your manuscript on it, and really we don't even provide formatting guidelines or instructions, but as long as it's formed in kind of, what we think of as a traditional manuscript or research paper with title, authors, institutions linked to one another, maybe through a superscript reference, keywords called out, abstract, body, funders, and the funders listed. As long as that's in there in the document, they just drag and drop the file right into the submission, and it will pull out the information and automatically drop it into the appropriate fields directly in the submission. So it's another attempt at saving people time and saving authors time. So if they don't have to fill in their authors because they're able to select them, and they don't have to fill in their title, their abstract, or keywords, affiliations, or even their funders, all of that saves them time, cuts down on frustration as they're working through something, and it just really is a net benefit. So, we've had this in the system for probably the last year or so in various forms as we've been working through and different groups have been testing through our beta time. We discovered, over the course of people using it saves them about 25% time from before having submission prefill on. Even if the submission prefill happened to miss an author or miss an affiliation, which it's pretty good at picking those up, and the net end is that it's still saving users time. So we're pretty excited about it. A few other notes, if an affiliation or an institution is connected to Ringgold, it will automatically connect that institution to Ringgold right in the system, so someone doesn't have to worry about, searching for the institution, linking it to Ringgold. Same too for funders. If a funder is connected to FundRef, it's going to connect it directly to FundRef. It'll also add the grant number if that's included in the manuscript document. And if an author includes an email and that email matches an account that's already in the journal, instead of just filling in the information, it will actually place the account that is in the system in the author list. So it's just another way to try and save time. So submission prefill combined with the add previous co-authors, we feel like we're making a lot of great progress in saving authors the amount of time that they have to spend in the system. So right now it is available for, with doc or docx Word files. A little bit later on this year, we're going to add PDF, and you'll have the option to either use a Word document and a PDF, or just a PDF for submission prefill. So really excited about this. It was taken out of beta at the end of this past year because we were confident enough in the underlying technology and the process that is going on here that we really feel, especially through our testing, that it is saving authors time. It's not to say that, with everything like machine learning or algorithms like this, where we're trying to extract data from an unformed document, which basically means we're not telling you what orders to put things in. We have a general idea of how things are formatted. So with all of that, every now and then it can still have a few misses, and that's just to be expected as we train it up a little bit more to be a bit more smarter and intuitive of a program underneath. So if you do turn this on, and we certainly hope you do, and you see something like, oh, I expected that institution to be pulled, but it wasn't, you just go ahead and let our support teams know, because then what we do is we go in and we take a look, we work with our data team that works with submission prefill, and they look and they say, hey, is there anything that we can change about the underlying technology that could capture that the next go around? And the teams are pretty active with those updates. So just, let our support team know. And if you'd like to, turn this on and you haven't turned it on, it's perfectly fine to do with a journal that's already accepting submissions. Just go ahead and reach out to your normal contact, whether that's a publisher or that you work with or someone on our staff here, and just get that conversation started. So submission prefill is pretty exciting. And we're just going to keep adding to it and tweaking it. The other thing that happened with this previous, release in the first quarter is just a lot of good input from our community. And, we just wanted to include this to show that your input matters in our discovery. And when we say discovery, we're talking about it's part of the overall process of determining what are the next value adds to the product that we need to work on that maximize, value for people. It does us no good if we add something to the product and no one uses it. So we make sure that we include your feedback, and that's from our ideas site, and our overall discovery of, where our kind of roadmap, if you will, is going next. And so a lot of your input was included in this past release, and so we're just go through a few of those. We had as Chris talked about, the authors added after revision alert. HTML email capabilities were moved out of beta. That's another thing that we've kind of been testing for a few years. And, moving from text emails to an HTML kind of email setup is a little bit trickier than one would normally think. So we went through a beta period with that, and we took the beta label off in this last release as well. And so that's, moving along nicely. We added some of these are just small things, but they're usability improvements that, again, save you time when you kind of, take it over the long term. And so just something like adding a hover over the note to title saves you from having to click into the note all the time. You can see, what's actually contained to that note. We also added the invite again for reviewers had declined, which was another highly voted on idea. And, post the release, we made a quick update just to the UI a little bit to give it a slightly less prominent placement on the page, and that seems to be working quite well. We also added versioning updates on email templates, and the use case here was to, as someone's making a number of changes down their email templates, without that updated kind of section, it makes it a little bit more difficult to remember exactly where you are in that long list of templates. So again, it's just, a small change, small tweak, low effort, high impact of saving you time on your side. We also added a update to the Manuscript Advanced Search. And again, just trying to save you time where we can. We just, went back and added a new search and a modified search. So at your search results, you can see, you can go back to modifying your search or, create a new search directly from there. So it's pretty exciting. And I think the takeaway here is, your ideas, they play a vital role in our discovery. They really do kind of cement the partnership between us as we're trying to better understand, what's the right direction to go. And so we take those ideas and we incorporate that into, our overall planning. So, a lot of the thanks also goes to you. And then, of course, with every release, there comes the next release. We move from one to the next, and sometimes it happens in a whirlwind. And so coming up in late May 27th, so just under a month away from now, we will have our Q2 2020 release. So we'll talk a little bit about what is all included in that release. So it's happening on the 27th of May, no outages required. Even though no outages required, and that's something that we've been working on, it's been very successful the last few releases. We'll still send you a notification before and after, so just so you're aware that it's coming and that it's gone out. And otherwise, you'll just see the changes in the system. And so that's pretty exciting that you don't have to take a 4-hour window. So some highlights we'll go over here, and I won't read them here because we're going to go through them, is Manuscript Flags. So, as you know, there has been an uptick for some journals and some publishers for submissions coming into them related to COVID-19. And one thing that we heard from publishers was that we needed more flags to be able to help identify and route those papers if possible. So one thing that we did is we added some additional flags with, and we actually kind of just added them over early last week. And so those flags are in the system right now. There's 7 additional flags. They work just like the existing flags in the system. The reporting for these flags, though, will have to come in the release. So that's kind of how we're tying it to the release. They exist in the same area. They show in the same area, on the header or the breadcrumb trail. And it's just a way for us to kind of add, additional flagging opportunities. And that was something that we did very quickly based on feedback, and I think really demonstrated our agile capabilities. So that was pretty exciting. I felt like really demonstrated our nimbleness. We're also adding some publisher over time reports. We're adding a weekly grouping to the already existing publisher submission report. And then we're also going to add, so the submissions over time report exists, and you can check that out right now. I checked, and the weekly grouping actually was released to the system this last week, so you could go ahead and take a look at that. We're also bringing in reviews over time and decisions over time. Part of this kind of COVID discussion was publishers really wanted to understand, how is this impacting me? And one of the best ways to tell that is through an overtime report. And if we can provide that at a publisher level, either reviews over time or decisions over time, and provide some data points there, that'll really help publishers kind of understand where their needs are. So there's an added weekly grouping, which you can see here, to the submissions over time report. And then, with the release, you'll see a decisions over time and a reviews over time report added to Cognos. So, and my time is growing short here, so I want to keep moving along. The other thing we're working on, and this is huge for the next release, but it's one of those things that at first it'll seem very quiet, and that's a productization of scripts. So as ScholarOne has grown, so too, the number of requests for scripts have grown. And when we say scripts, it's like, well, what is that? Well, it could be something like publisher notification services set up. It could be like a feature activation, like turning on Publons across a suite of a publisher portfolio. It could be something like task reassignment. And so all of this is part of the natural growth of a software as a service, software as a service company, and the natural growth where, when you're first kind of working with a product, you're you're approaching things one way, and then as you get to a point where you see, oh yeah, there's critical mass of buy-in here, we really kind of need to take this to the next step, and that's what we're doing here. So, and the goal of all of this is to reduce the backlog of scripts for publishers, right? So the amount of time that a publisher might need to wait right now for, any of those tasks that I mentioned below, or, different tasks that are related to scripts right now could be, anywhere from 3 to, at the high end, 5, maybe 6 weeks. And we're going to bring that down. And the way we're going to bring that down is through this thing that we're calling it's a feature activation harness, really. So what it is it's a framework that we've built into the system for our own teams to activate things on their own without having to go through a scripted process. And so, why is this good for journals? It reduces, as I mentioned, the time you wait for scripts, and then it frees up those staff that were previously occupied running scripts, writing scripts, QAing scripts, doing database checks, that sort of thing. It frees up those staff to work on other items that are more of a value add. So it kind of pulls them out of a script maintenance mode and puts them more into a, additional widget, additional features mode. And so that's really exciting for us. And so next we will move over to Chris and submission integration.
Thanks, Ben. Submission integration is a major focus of this May release coming out. Submission integration, you may ask, what is it? It is the technology and infrastructure needed to accept submissions from external sources. So for example, a publisher may have their own submission portal where they're collecting submissions and sending them to ScholarOne. There are numerous preprint servers like BioArchive and ChemArchive that Josh mentioned earlier, and then authoring platforms as well. Next click. So you may ask, why is ScholarOne doing this now? As Josh mentioned earlier, we're currently on pace to receive 2.5 million submissions this year, probably more next year. And we estimate a world in the not too distant future, potentially next year or the year after, where 40% of those 2.5 million submissions are coming through some sort of external service before they get to ScholarOne. So if you see on the bar graph, that's over 1 million submissions coming through. And so what we needed to do in this release is to build out infrastructure and technology to make sure that we can support and work with these submissions as seamlessly and as wonderfully as we do with the standard submissions. Next slide. So what does this mean? I think this means a couple of things. It means that we needed tools in ScholarOne for users to visually see where these submissions are going and whether they're successfully ingesting. The ingestion process has a couple of moving parts, and while nearly all of them are successful, some of them are not. And when there's a failure, we needed a place to show clients this and to let them know why it failed. Number two, we needed a way to know for ourselves and to let our clients know that the system is up and running. All good technology systems have these, so we will be implementing a heartbeat monitor, which basically says, yes, we are taking in submissions, we are processing them appropriately, and we can ingest them as needed. Nothing is down. And then also a queue depth monitoring system so that in case we got an unusually large influx of submissions, and the depth got too large that we weren't able to process them within the timer length, that we would want a monitor there to let us know. And so those will be implemented. Next. New APIs to retrieve status ingestions. This is basically a corollary to the first item where we had a UI dashboard to view ingestions. This is same way to get status of those ingestions and reasons for failures, but through an API. And then finally, self-service configurations for notifications. So as you probably know, ScholarOne offers an automated outbound messaging service. So HTTP calls
to notify external systems when events happened. A lot of the submission integrations are tied to these notifications, and we really wanted to give clients the ability to self configure these notifications. So within ScholarOne, with this release, there will be a new role entitled Integration Viewer, similar to the Reports Viewer role that currently allows for people to use publisher-level reports. And this will give users a couple of new features, such as, again, the ability to view this UI dashboard, but I think most importantly, the ability to configure their own notifications. This is not just notifications for external submissions. This is all of the notifications across the tasks that you currently would do notifications for. So this will be available in the May release. Next slide.
Hopefully you're seeing the next slide here.
Yep. No, this is perfect. I've got it here. Yeah. So just two additional updates to point out around Reviewer Connect. So I know there's a couple of questions in the Q&A about this, but we have been working on some improvements to the search algorithm. One of the things that those improvements will do would hopefully to be able to help weed out some of the irrelevant results that some of you have seen occasionally, but also will start to allow us to do more things in the realm of conflict checking. And so one that we're working on in the near term is conflicts around institution. So being able to flag that within the search results and be able to filter out potential conflicts. So that's one area that I know has been a long time on the backlog for reviewer recommendation tools. And then the next area that we've got is some additional integration. So if ScholarOne's not the only system that you use, Reviewer Connect is already available in a number of systems. It'll soon be available in these additional systems, eJournalPress and Open Journal systems as a plugin.
Awesome. Thanks, Josh. So we are just going to touch on COVID-19 resources for everyone as related to ScholarOne. I'm sure your inbox has been inundated by emails from every company that you have touched base with around COVID-19 and what they're doing. But, and so we thought we'd include this here just because it's kind of topical to what you do on a daily basis, right? And so, the biggest thing that I'll point to is just if you have time, as you have time, just go ahead and go to our website. It's theclarivate.com, and at the end, ScholarOne-COVID-19. And the reason for that is because we've put some, we've kind of tried to gather tips and tricks for people by role, right? What do we do in this time frame? So we did, we were receiving a number of support questions and comments. We thought, what if we put this in one place? We just put kind of like the frequently asked questions, and then we just made it known to people that it was available, and it might provide some comfort to people as they're trying to work through what everyone's trying to work through. And so I won't read all of these to you because I really want you to go to the website, and the reason for that is because on our training team side, many of you have probably worked with Gwen Baker, who is awesome. A lot of these are actually linked to her training videos that explain specifically this is how you do the thing we're talking about here. And since we want to get more to the Q&A, I won't go through this too much. I'll just say if you're an editor or an administrator and you work with a publishing office or someone that you normally check with, of course, you'd want to check with them first and just, engage your normal protocols. But these are some things that, would be available to you. The same goes with publishers. There's a number of options that are available to you, and I'll just point you to the website, and I'll put the website link in the chat here in just a moment. And so again, that resource for you is clarivate.com/Web of Science group/support/ScholarOne-COVID-19. And of course, if there's anything else that we can do to help, don't ever hesitate to reach out to our product support team because they're awesome. And where to go to learn more. So, this is just part of, again, there's a wealth of information and resources out there. You can review our release notes at our help site, which was recently redesigned, which is a lot easier to find things, in my opinion. You can see our release notes section where you can see the old style PDF of release notes, which definitely serves a purpose, but we also now put them in HTML, so you can just kind of click through the things that have been released. We have the ScholarOne TV, which many of you have seen, and again, that's part of our effort to kind of ramp up our, not only our video tutorials, but also just information about what's happening in the release. As I mentioned before, you can always contact us for more information at s1help@clarivate.com. And, if we definitely want you to hear from us. We want you to be part of this conversation. So please make sure you sign up for ScholarOne webinars for future webinars. And then with that, I think we are ready to move over to Q&A. So Brian, I'll pass it over to you for Q&A.
Actually, I will moderate the Q&A. So I've got quite a few questions here. We will try to get to as many of them as we can. I've switched my video back on, so hello everyone. Not just a talking voice.
Yeah, as have I, and I apologize.
Yes. So first question, and this is one I will take, is about on occasions there are reviewers' suggestions whose articles have almost nothing to do with the ones that I want to see. And I mentioned this during the Reviewer Connect update. That's one of the reasons that the algorithm has been refined. And so we've done some before and after tests with some of the changes to the algorithm, and we think that we found mechanisms to start to filter some of that out. So we're very hopeful that the new algorithm and some of the additions, the improvements to that will actually provide a better experience. Question 2. They're looking for improved tools to help clear out inactive reviewers in an efficient way. And I'll start with this, but I think we can also talk about some of the work we've done, maybe Chris or Sven. But I will say that we have done, we don't necessarily have tools in the system yet around this, but we have done work with a number of publishers on helping to clear out inactive users generally. So that includes reviewers. And so this is obviously a pretty complicated task, but Chris or Sven, do you guys have anything to add about some of the work just generally we've done in the past around scripting this?
Yeah, so typically what you'll first want to look at is what criteria you want to use to decide if someone is inactive. One of the things you want to make note of is that in a lot of cases, a user, or in this case, a reviewer, doesn't need to log in to complete a review. So they use a deep link. What you'll want to do is just think about what criteria you want to use. You may want to look at sort of last login or last review completed, whichever is first, or last invitation accepted. Once you have those criteria, we can work with you to come up with a way to remove those reviewers. It's not in a lot of cases, you're dealing with years worth of reviewers that you may want to get rid of. So it's not necessarily a simple process or a straightforward process, but it is something that we can do, and we have looked at potentially making this a product feature at some point.
Great, thank you. And we'll go to the next question here, which is concerns around reviewers who opt out of Publons and an email is still generated to Publons that includes their review. And I think, so one of the things that we've done on the ScholarOne front is we have almost all the journals that we have integrated with Publons for recognition are using our API. So the API calls actually don't include the full review. It's a notification that happened, and the subsequent call, there's essentially ways to be able to filter that out more easily than, say, sending an email. I also know that Publons does have a pretty strict sort of deletion policy for data that doesn't make it in. So I think that we can talk about this more in a further webinar. I think that if you're on ScholarOne and you're using an email-based integration, I think we can talk about converting you over to the API. And if not, if other systems that use email-based integration, we can talk about if there are ways in the future to kind of remove that earlier. So next question, Chris, Was there an additional cost for document analysis?
There is no additional cost to turn on document analysis. It has a number of the tools that we mentioned and discussed today, such as the unusual activity detection, which is no cost, the manuscript scope or scope fit tool, which is no cost. If you want to use the Unsiloed tools, they are a ScholarOne partner, and there is a cost on that side, and we can easily put you in contact with Unsiloed to work through that. There is opportunities for trials as well. So if you're interested in the Unsiloed piece, definitely get in contact with Unsiloed or ScholarOne. But for the other tools, there is no cost. It can be turned on anytime.
Great. Sven, is prefill already working? Does it need to be activated from the journal side? And is submission prefill a free or paid feature?
All good questions. Submission prefill is working. It does need to be activated by journal, and that's something that if you have the right permissions, you can do on your side, or you could also reach out to our teams here, through the product support team or the configuration team. And there is no cost. Although if you reach out to our configuration team, there may be configuration costs, which are, it depends, I guess. But there's no cost to actually use that feature, not at all. And so, yeah, you would turn it on in the add-ons section of configuration.
Excellent. Thank you, Sven. And there were a couple of questions just generally around integrations. And I think there was a question about Mecca, and then a question about integrations with other journal platforms. Chris, do you want to just talk about that at a high level?
Yes, so the Mecca standard is, I believe, currently out for, or I should say, the Mecca recommended practice is currently out for review and voting with the NISO committee. We are definitely in talks with other platforms and journals to include this and doing some exploratory work. It is not currently on the roadmap for now, but we are, again, working with a number of journals to get this in place, and I would expect to hear more about this very soon.
Yeah, and one thing I'll add too, just to that, is like all of the work that we've done around submission integrations and the stuff that's even coming up in this next release. These are all basic platform capabilities so that we can plug ScholarOne into other systems to collect submissions. So I think, as we're moving forward, we're in a good spot to be able to launch that pretty quickly. It's not, from the ground up. We've already got the ability to take submissions. We're getting them from 10+ different systems already. So this won't be a major challenge to be able to do that once we've got some of the details finalized. All right, questions keep rolling in, so we're going to keep going here. We've got, so there's a question about noticed within your slides it's possible to add a co-author during the revision process, and that this is something that would lead to more rejections of manuscripts, even if it was previously approved for publication. So maybe Sven and Chris, you guys want to talk about some of the things we've done around locking down and flagging co-author lists?
Sure, and I think some of that could be configuration setup. So maybe one journal allows for the addition of authors, but another doesn't. But with the new settings that were added, one was in the last release of last year, and I forget which came out in which order, but so we will either flag if a new author has been added, or you can completely prevent a new author from being added. And then, as Chris mentioned earlier, it would flag it in the unusual activity detector report.
Perfect, thanks. We got an idea suggestion. If you search for first or last name in the top bar and then get lots of results, there's no option to modify search in order to narrow down results. Please add that. Noted. We will look at that.
Yeah, and I'll just add in that caveat. I think if you go to advanced user search, you do have the option to modify. And again, that's not the top bar; it's the advanced user search. But you would have the opportunity to modify there. But definitely noted. Thank you.
So we had some questions about HTML/rich text emails. So one of the questions is, how do we turn it on? And then another question was about there was a defect identified with certain mail clients, and is there any estimate on when that will be addressed, or kind of the scope of that?
Yes. So turning on HTML emails is something that occurs, I believe, through our side. So you'd have to reach out to either our product support team or the configuration person that you might work with. I am aware of the one issue with the links, and so what's happening is with some web clients. The links that you might see in the email might not actually be clickable, and so you'd actually have to copy and paste them into a browser, and that's a fairly common challenge that a lot of people who send emails run into. And so a lot of times you'll see if this link does not work, copy and paste into your browser. So that's kind of the issue that we're seeing, but we are trying to resolve that with those specific web platforms. And I think I'll have to double check. It's either in a hotfix just before this release, or it's in with the release in May. So I'll have to double check, and maybe we could get back to whomever asked that question. I'm trying to look and see if we have a name.
Yeah, I've got the name here, so we can get back to them directly. Perfect. So two more questions about submission prefill. So one is, can submission prefill take the details from a title page that is separate to the main manuscript file?
Yeah, that's a good question. Not at this time. Right now, it's just the main document, and it might be something that we would look into in the future. For this kind of like first go around as we've been ramping up, it's really about making sure that we had the underlying technology working as we wanted it to, and so that's why we just focused on the one main document file for now.
And the second question, does submission prefill require a specific manuscript format?
It does not necessarily, although I'll give an example where there was one publisher who they had a template and the author string was in the footer. And so our algorithm just wasn't looking for an author string down in the footer of that manuscript. But once they told us and they said, hey, we put our author string in the footer, our team was able to make adjustments, and now they can capture the information from the footer. So generally speaking, and again, we don't want to put a specific template out there because we really want this to be freeform where it picks up everything. And so, generally speaking, if you have title, authors with either superscripts or subscripts linking to the institutions, you have an abstract and keywords, it picks those things out pretty good. And if you go to the real basic where you label everything beforehand, abstract for the abstract section, keywords just before keywords, funders just before funders, well, then the system does a great job because you've basically called out exactly what is that data set that's coming just after that. But ultimately, where we're going to, and I feel like we're really close to getting there, is to a point where you would never have to call out these are keywords because the system just knows and it picks those up. And in the vast majority of the cases, I've found that it's doing that, but every now and then it'll miss. And so that's where your feedback on how it's ingesting is important to keep developing the algorithm and the underlying technology that's pulling the data out. So short answer is no, you don't need a format. What you think of as your traditional kind of research paper format is very helpful. But if you have something that's non-standard and you see that it's missing on a consistent basis, definitely let us know, and our teams will work to make sure that we pick that up in the future. So that's a great question.
Great, and I know we're getting close to the end of our time. I'm going to go through a few more questions. For those questions that we didn't get a chance to answer, we will follow up with you separately on them. One was there seems to be a relatively small limit on the file sizes that can be attached to emails. This is not sufficient sometimes. Chris or Sven, do you guys have any comment about that?
Yes. So there is a limit, and that is the correct size, 10 megabytes. And the reason for that is it's basically a spam prevention sort of mechanism, and that works through Amazon Web Services, which is kind of the main provider here that we work with. And so, there's nothing that we can do on our side to specifically get around it. And that's, just what the limit is. And Chris, I don't know if you have anything that you'd add to that.
No, that was perfect.
I'm not sure of any any other workarounds out within the system that would outside of copying the text or something into the email or reducing the size of the attachment.
Yeah, that's something too. I know we've been talking about files via API for
Yeah, I mean,
we have, and so there may be ways, there may be things we can think about for accessing things via link. So yep, it's a good point, and I think we're constantly kind of refining things around email. There's a question about when would the weekly submissions report be available? Sven?
Yeah, so that's submissions over time is available now. It has the grouping of monthly and yearly currently. I did see weekly, and it was just yesterday because that team, the Cognos Reports team, they can be independent of the actual release schedule. And I thought I saw the weekly on the grouping available on the submission time report yesterday before my power went out. But then after that, I wasn't able to check because I didn't have power. So I would say go ahead and check the submissions over time report. If weekly isn't there now, it will be shortly. I think it is there.
One last question. There was a question here about email reminders were held up recently and then sent out en masse. And can you prevent this in the future? And I think generally, are there any things that we're doing around just email delivery that we have planned to help prevent this sort of thing? Chris or Sven, any comment on some of the work that we've been doing with the tech team to help plan for future events like that?
Yeah. Oh, go ahead,
I
Chris.
can say.
Well, I felt like I was talking too much, so I was going to let you handle that one.
Yeah, so a little while back, there were emails, reminders were held up due to kind of an additional use of broadcast emails in ScholarOne due to the COVID-19 outbreak. A lot of people wanted to communicate on a large scale with their teams and their communities. So that caused a backup in the amount of emails that were, or an increase in the amount of emails being sent out, and a backup in our ability to process them. We send out, hundreds of thousands of emails every day. One of the things that we're planning to do as a result of that is to change the processing so that emails sent out as a broadcast don't affect emails going out for reminders. Essentially, two threads, two ways out. One for reminders and essential emails, and one for broadcast emails, which can likely be delayed a little bit longer if needed to get out those time-sensitive emails.
Thank you, Chris. And I think with that, Sven, just we're done. We're at time. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. Really appreciate everyone joining us. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening this whole time. If you're able to, we'll send the recordings out. Again, if you have questions, reach out to our teams or go to the resources that we mentioned, and we'll talk to you again soon.